A couple days ago, Amazon ran their Prime Day sale, which caused a lot of the cameras out in the market, especially in the used camera market, to be offered at a discounted price. And today I'm excited to get my hands on a camera brand that I haven't used in a while, and it is the Panasonic Lumix S5II. Now, for those of you who are familiar with Panasonic, they are known for their Micro Four Thirds camera offerings, and the S line is actually their selection of full frame cameras. Luckily, we were able to snag an open box model at our local Best Buy. They listed the condition as good, and it turns out this was actually their floor model. So this is gonna be my first time using this camera, and I just wanted to give you all my first impressions, kind of give you guys a sense of how it feels to work with it. If you guys were curious about how the Lumix S5II looks, stick around and let's get started. We actually have quite the full agenda today. We have to film a video for my other channel on the Strip, so we're going to be hanging around inside the Fontainebleau today, so you guys are going to get to see a couple of those clips. Outside right now and just wanted to do a quick update on how the Lumix S5II is doing so far. So we're here outside and it is a casual 108 degrees, so it's pretty warm. The good thing about it so far is I haven't seen any signs of overheating, which is a really huge plus. As far as battery life, since we're talking about performance, so far we've been filming off and on for the last couple hours. Full battery is 5 bars, so I'm about 50% battery at this point probably. So we'll see how it'll hold up for the rest of our filming today. So we're here in a much darker space since we are at the nightclub area of the hotel, but really quickly I just wanted to talk about the dual native ISO on the S5II. One of the best things about this camera so far is it has dual native ISO and it's performing pretty well as we've tested it out in the few clips here in this darker part of the building. I would say it's pretty comparable to the performance of the A7S III's dual native, so huge plus on the S5II. Quick break at the food court here just so that we can talk a little bit more about how the camera is going. One thing that I really like so far with this camera is the buttons. They're more intuitive with how they function. It's been really easy for me to switch to changing my f-stops, my ISO, just to make sure my exposure is correct, and obviously making sure that everything stays focused. Speaking of focusing though, that's the one thing that Lumix is notorious for, which is their autofocus can sometimes be a little iffy. The same thing with this camera. I've found that in most cases where there's a human or a face, it does really well because it has the face detection. So ours is turned on to that by default. But if I'm shooting something that's a little bit wider and it doesn't have any faces to focus on, it tends to hunt a little bit. So I do just resort to tapping, which is not really a big deal because you're already looking at the LCD screen anyway. So that's just the easiest way to make sure that your shot is in focus. But other than that, that's really my only takeaway so far with shooting with this thing. Battery update, it is now down to 2 bars. It's been about a half an hour since I last checked in with you all, so we should be almost wrapped up here tonight, and then we'll be able to review these clips. It's been a couple days and I couldn't come back last time because we were running low on battery and we wanted to still be able to finish the Fontainebleau video, which we did. So I wanted to come back here to go over a couple more points and give you kind of like my first impressions of the S5II. What came with the camera is obviously the S5II body, and we also had this paired with the 20 to 60 mil f3.5 to 5.6 lens, and that is actually the kit lens that came with this camera. And the mic that I was using is the Sony ECM G1. You guys have seen me talk about this mic a lot in the past, and it's just nice for a really compact setup like I have here. Side note, I do regret using this mic. I've taken a break from filming the hotels and I have been reviewing a lot of studio mics and filming a lot at home, so I kind of forgot to account for background noise, and this mic unfortunately did pick up a little bit more than I wanted, so I wasn't super happy with the audio that came out of that video. Next, let's talk about the stabilization of this camera. After editing those clips for that video, I was actually pleasantly surprised by the stability of the footage just on its own. If you're familiar with Lumix cameras at all, there are different modes of stabilization, as there are in many different cameras, and theirs is called E-stabilization and boost. From a few of the videos that I saw very briefly, a lot of people have said that they liked turning on boost more than E-stabilization. I checked what settings we had, because again, this was the first time I'm ever using it, and we were set up at E-stabilization. If I'm not mistaken, you can turn on E-stabilization and boost. Basically, the difference between the two of those is E-stabilization has a slight crop, and since I had it on, I guess I had a slight crop every time I hit record, versus boost where you wouldn't have that crop. At 20 mil, which is when I had my camera right in front of me, like at arm's length, the crop size wasn't too bad or too noticeable, at least not for when I was using it. Now that I'm aware of it though, I'm probably gonna be able to look for it, but as someone who is just using it run and gun, it wasn't too bad. Speaking of stability though, I did notice that this camera also has a wobble. Kind of like Canon cameras, if you shoot at the widest angle, it has that infamous Canon wobble. And I was surprised to see that the Lumix one also had that. If you are doing a walking shot like I was, of course, everything was filmed handheld that day, you're gonna pick up some shake if you're not walking steadily. I've heard that if you used boost stabilization, it should minimize that wobble, but again, I didn't get to test it out. So if you guys have used Lumix cameras, I would love to know what your guys' experience was, if it really does help to have that turn on versus E-stabilization, or are you just kind of at the mercy of having to shoot not as wide? Let me know in the comments below. What surprised me about this camera though is the controls. Now, you guys know, if you guys have been following us for a while, I am mostly a Canon shooter, but I also have an A7S III as my main camera. Sony being a little bit more in-depth to control versus Canon, where it's a little bit friendlier. You don't have to dig as deeply within the menu system. Well, between the two of those and now using the Lumix for the very first time, it was the easiest to use, mainly because of the labeling of the buttons. There's dedicated buttons for ISO, white balance, and exposure. And then of course you have the standard dials that you can rotate, one at the front, one in the back, and then even one more spinny dial on the very back to control your menus. I found the positioning of all the buttons to be quite intuitive and very easy to use. I basically shot everything in manual just so that we could change everything as we go. We didn't have time to play with customizing just yet. So as someone who used it for the very first time, we survived knowing that we knew where all the default settings were. I will say this as a Canon and also a Sony camera user, and now playing with the Lumix, I really like Vlog. I do. And before you guys crucify me, it's because I really like how luminant everything is, and I guess the saturation, which I know, of course, if you're a skilled colorist, especially if you're used to manipulating the colors in your footage, you can definitely get it to look just kind of like a vlog, whether it's for Canon or Sony or any other type of camera. You can always just color match it. But out the gate with vlog, as I was able to convert it right away, it pretty much was super workable for me already. Vlog also has a really great dynamic range. Had to shoot something that was a little bit too overexposed. I pretty much knew it was going to be unusable, and we pushed the lens to its limit and just closing the eye as much as possible. Now, bringing that clip into our timeline, I've expected it to be very blown out and again, very unusable. But just to play around with it, I just pulled down the highlights to see if it was recoverable. And I was shocked to find out that it actually brought the colors back into the video. Not only the colors, but also the detail was still retained. I was very surprised. Whatever default settings that the Lumix had, the dynamic range and the vlog really just impressed me right out the gate. And that's my biggest takeaway from that. All right, and that's all I have so far. If you guys were interested in learning a little bit more about the Lumix S5II, I will be working on a full review once I've gotten a chance to spend a bit more time with it, so keep an eye out for that. If you guys did find this video helpful, if you could please give us a thumbs up down below, as well as subscribe for more tech and gear related videos. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are so far with this camera, or if you've used it in the past. I'd love to know if you guys have any tips or tricks on how you guys like using it. And yeah, I guess that's it for me today. I'll see you guys in the next video.